It's not uncommon for a married couple to have an age gap where the woman is younger than her husband. As long as both partners are adults, this doesn't typically create difficulties. However, things change drastically when one partner is just entering their teenage years while the other has reached full maturity. In such circumstances, it becomes extremely challenging to predict whether the young couple will continue to share common views and interests as life progresses. The consequences of such misunderstandings can turn into a real tragedy. The small Austrian town of Kitzbühel is nestled in the picturesque Tyrol region. The population of this town barely exceeds 8,000 residents. Despite its modest size, more than 20,000 vacationers flock here during the winter months, drawn by the magnificent mountain slopes. For many decades, this area has gained a reputation as an elite winter retreat for well-off individuals. Additionally, numerous festivities are organized here, gathering sports enthusiasts and their fans from various corners of the globe. In October 2018, on the eve of a competition, ski routes were being prepared while hotel complexes and tourist businesses were finalizing their preparations to warmly welcome the many visitors. However, the festive mood was shattered by a terrible tragedy, a mass murder that forever changed the peaceful life of the locals, dividing it into a time before and after these events. Austrian native Nadine Hinter Holzer was born into a close-knit family as their second child. From a young age, the girl stood out for her cheerfulness, activeness, and attractive appearance. She formed a large circle of friends who valued Nadine for her friendliness, wit, and easygoing nature. Along with her parents and older brother, the girl lived in a spacious house in Kitzbühel, attended school, and showed great promise. When she turned 14, her life underwent significant changes. The student met a young man named Andreas, who was 20 years old at the time. The young man had a mature appearance, while Nadine was still a teenager. The 6-year age difference at that stage seemed quite noticeable, but a mutual attraction developed between them. A few meetings, which Nadine's parents were unaware of, grew into a romantic relationship. Eventually, both realized that the age gap could pose the main obstacle to their love. The girl was worried that her adult boyfriend could face legal issues due to being involved with a minor, but they didn't want to stop seeing each other. Nadine gradually began preparing her parents for the news about the important changes in her personal life. Her parents felt some unease, but the young man showed determination and took a bold step. Andreas decided to personally meet his beloved's family to obtain their consent to continue the relationship. Right away, he emphasized that his intentions were serious. He wanted to start a family with Nadine but was willing to wait until she finished school and gained a profession. Andreas was already acquainted with Nadine's brother, and after this conversation, their friendship grew even stronger. The parents positively assessed the young man's sincerity, which was further supported by their daughter's glowing description of him as a polite, delicate, and caring guy. Ultimately, the family took a favorable view of the young man and gave their blessing for the relationship to continue. Since the girl was going through the challenging teenage stage of development, her parents figured that a connection with a more mature partner would have a positive influence on her. They hoped he would take care of her, protect her from dangers, and help the girl avoid problematic situations. Andreas's behavior indicated that Nadine truly meant a great deal to him. The young man befriended her family. Initially, the couple simply spent their free time together, and after 3 years, he moved into their home. On social media, information appeared about the young couple's engagement. Andreas dreamed of marriage but kept his promise not to rush things, allowing his beloved to finish school and determine her life priorities. Their relationship lasted several years, and during this period, the girl's relatives began to perceive the young man as a family member. When Nadine reached the age of 18 and became an adult, her partner was already 24. The couple decided to live separately from her parents. The girl's grandmother provided significant assistance by offering the young couple her apartment to set up their independent life. By that time, Nadine had finished school and planned to obtain a driver's license and enroll in college. Marriage and motherhood were not part of her plans yet, which slightly saddened Andreas since the girl aimed to achieve financial independence first. She signed up for a driving school, where she commuted in the company of friends. Her buddies regularly picked her up to attend classes together. Nadine became seriously passionate about dancing and planned to pursue a career in this field. Among their acquaintances, the couple was considered a paragon of love. Despite a certain unusualness due to the age difference, everyone noticed that their union was based on sincere feelings and understanding. It seemed that only happiness without any threats awaited them. At the beginning of their acquaintance, when the girl was only 14, Andreas went through the challenging teenage stage with her, and they managed not only to overcome difficulties but also to strengthen their bond. However, when Nadine became an adult, certain complications began to arise in their union. Andreas wanted to take the relationship further, start a family, and have children, but he couldn't get his partner to share those desires. The 24-year-old young man worked as a stonemason, devoting most of his time and energy to his job. In the evenings, after a hard day, he dreamed of a peaceful rest with his beloved in their home. However, this didn't align with the new aspirations of 18-year-old Nadine. Having become an adult, she still longed for entertainment with friends and attending parties. Previously, the couple constantly spent time on walks together, but now Andreas preferred relaxing at home in front of the TV, which seemed too monotonous to Nadine. For a while, the girl managed to persuade her partner to go for a walk or have fun outside the house, but gradually this became increasingly difficult. Andreas started declining invitations to hang out, each time explaining it by fatigue and the need to get up early for work. The young man complained about the necessity to regain his strength, and Nadine showed no understanding. It was then that the age difference between the partners became especially noticeable. The girl was in the prime of her youth and craved fun, realizing that Andreas had already gone through this stage and had different priorities. However, she had no intention of changing for him or making compromises. Nadine wanted to enjoy her youth and have a good time with her buddies. This led to the emergence of arguments between the couple. The girl even warned Andreas that under such conditions, she would have to end the relationship. Although she expressed this not only to her partner but also to friends and family, the young man didn't take such words seriously. He saw no grounds for a breakup, assuring that his feelings hadn't changed. Hoping that the girl would eventually calm down and everything would return to its previous state, the young man even planned a lavish wedding, considering the timing favorable since their relationship had already lasted 5 years. He dreamed of updating his status on social networks from engaged to married, but Nadine's constant complaints and talks about breaking up began to affect him. The adult partner was becoming increasingly intrusive and harsh. The girl felt that Andreas was trying to completely control her and was getting irritated by his failures in this regard. She started sharing with her friends that there had always been difficulties in their relationship that she had previously kept silent about. In the summer of 2018, Nadine finally decided to end the relationship but wanted to avoid quarrels. She hoped to maintain a friendly companionship. At that time, the girl was 19, and Andreas was 25 years old. According to Nadine, her partner had never displayed cruelty or aggression and never imposed any prohibitions on her. The main problem was his possessiveness and jealousy. He couldn't stand her presence among other young men, which led the girl to sever friendships with all her male buddies after starting a relationship with Andreas at the age of 14. Sometime in July, Nadine shared with her close girlfriends the news that she and her beloved had parted ways and from now on, each would live their own life. The girl was convinced that her boyfriend had accepted this decision without undue emotions. She had no doubt that their 5-year romance was definitively over. The couple stopped seeing each other. Andreas took his belongings from her grandmother's home and moved back to his parents' house. It seemed that the plan to remain friends was working. They retained a common circle of acquaintances, maintained contact with each other's families, and the young man continued to hang out with Kevin, Nadine's older brother, as they were the same age and had many shared interests. However, this turned out to be a deceptive calm because even then, during conversations between the former lovers, alarming signs appeared. Nadine became increasingly worried about how Andreas was actually coping with the breakup. Kevin suspected that he perceived it as a temporary whim of his beloved and was now simply waiting for the moment when Nadine would give a sign of reconciliation. Friends repeatedly discussed this topic. The young man couldn't come to terms with the fact that it was over. His thoughts and conversations revolved solely around his ex. His behavior was becoming obsessive. The former beloved sought the slightest pretext to contact Nadine, each time begging for another chance, trying to impress her, but at the same time, he didn't abandon hopes of rekindling the relationship and even continued talking about a future wedding and having children together. Just a month after the breakup, it became clear that the ex-boyfriend hadn't realized what had happened and simply refused to accept it. He didn't understand that their couple no longer existed. Each time, Nadine resolutely refused, emphasizing that everything was over between them, calling their connection a mistake of youth. Her other girlfriends heard this too. Such words painfully wounded Andreas, but he stubbornly endured everything, not losing hope for a reunion. Some of her friends even pitied him, but when 2 months had passed since the breakup, they began to realize that the young man's actions resembled stalking. He showed up everywhere the girl went and was always the first to initiate a conversation. Due to Andreas's intrusiveness, Nadine started avoiding her ex, trying to tactfully make it clear that it was over, but this only pushed him to be more persistent. Her attempts to evade encounters prompted him to arrange them himself. Everyone in the girl's circle knew well that she firmly rejected any attempts at reconciliation, but he conveyed completely different versions of events to their mutual acquaintances. Even when the 3rd month after the breakup arrived, he was still convinced that she wanted to be with him and was just trying to make him put in the effort and prove his feelings. Kevin, the ex's brother, tried to explain to Andreas that he should let Nadine go and pay attention to other girls, but he remained steadfast. The situation didn't improve even by October 5, 2018. By that time, 3 months had passed since the couple had definitively split up. This was known to her entire family. Even the young man's parents tried to talk some sense into him. That evening, Andreas and Kevin, Nadine's brother, decided to spend time together and visited several bars but didn't linger long anywhere. Eventually, the friends entered one of the establishments. As soon as he crossed the threshold, Kevin immediately spotted Nadine and wondered if it was a coincidence. Despite the town being small, there were many diverse bars for patrons, so the chances of running into each other daily were slim. It seemed as if Andreas was either following her, had informants about her whereabouts, or was methodically making the rounds of several different places in one evening. Kevin was aware that during these 3 months, Andreas hadn't stopped claiming mutual love and dreaming about a wedding after winning her heart again. Such chance encounters had occurred multiple times, but this evening, there was one significant difference. The girl was hanging out not only with a girlfriend but also in the company of an unfamiliar guy. Upon noticing him, Andreas instantly flew into a rage, approached his ex-girlfriend, grabbed her arm, and started arguing, trying to lead his ex out of the bar, but the heroine of our story resisted. Her 24-year-old companion introduced himself as Florian Janny, stepped between the girl and Andreas, explaining that he was just a friend and had no romantic relationship with her. Florian clarified that they had just met. However, this didn't appease Andreas. He was furious that Nadine was in the company of another man. The young man's indignation knew no bounds, but he barely restrained himself from starting a fight in the bar. Nadine herself, Florian, her friend, and brother made every effort to calm him down. They didn't allow Andreas to grab the girl and treat her like his property. With great effort, they managed to pacify the young man. Andreas burst into tears, deciding to leave the bar because he couldn't stay there any longer. Kevin remained with his sister, her friend, and Florian, concerned about their safety. Such a massive outburst of rage from Andreas occurred for the first time. Now the girl was genuinely worried about her own safety and also didn't want to remain in the bar but feared that her ex was waiting outside. After waiting for some time and making sure that he had driven away, the entire group decided to escort Nadine home. Florian was behind the wheel. He and her friend offered to stay the night so that the girl would feel protected. Nadine was so frightened that she agreed. Perhaps this decision turned out to be fateful. Around 4 a.m, Andreas could no longer restrain his jealousy and decided to talk to his ex again. When he arrived at her home, he saw an unknown car in the driveway. He realized it was Florian's vehicle. it turned out that Andreas hadn't actually gone home after the bar, he had stayed in the parking lot and secretly watched the group. The young man saw his ex return home with her brother and Florian, and no one else had left the house. This enraged him even more. Andreas suspected that Nadine was cheating and had a relationship with the new guy, and now they were carefreely spending time together. He now wanted to personally sort things out with the traitor and Florian. In a frenzy, Andreas jumped out of his car, started ringing the doorbell, and pounding on the front door. Instead of the girl and her guest, her father, 59-year-old Rupert, woke up. The man responded to Andreas's commotion, came out to calm the young man down. Nadine's father tried to send him away, insisting that it was too late at night to sort out relationship issues and asked to postpone it at least until morning. And when everyone woke up, they could calmly discuss everything. Rupert was aware of Florian and the incident at the bar. He assured Andreas that they were just friends. Nadine's father was a sensible person, he treated Andreas to cigarettes and went outside to stand with him. They talked about something. Probably, Rupert hoped that this would help calm down and persuade the jealous guy to leave. They had known each other for several years. Andreas had become almost like family to Nadine's parents. They knew him very well and had an excellent attitude toward him. They believed it was mutual. Therefore, the father didn't call the police to chase away his daughter's ex. After talking with Rupert, even Andreas calmed down a bit. He got into his car and drove off, and the man returned to the house and went to bed. Unfortunately, having driven a couple of blocks, the ex-boyfriend started getting irritated again. He returned 15 minutes later and again began knocking and ringing the doorbell. This time he woke up all the residents. Nadine and her brother Kevin came out to talk to him. Unlike Rupert, they were genuinely angry and wanted to get rid of Andreas by any means. Another conflict erupted at the front door, on the doorstep. No one held back in their statements anymore. Nadine wanted to get rid of her intrusive ex once and for all and cut off all contact with Andreas. She insisted that there could be no relationship between them. She demanded that he disappear from her life forever. Kevin supported his sister and declared that their friendship was overdue to Andreas's harassment of Nadine. The brother was alarmed by his friend's unhealthy behavior and no longer wished to maintain a connection with him. Andreas felt betrayed, he believed that Nadine had cheated on him and the others were covering for her. Kevin, his friend, had now turned away from him, instead of support from his buddy, he lost him. Before leaving, the ex-boyfriend tried to find out if Nadine had cheated on him. But the girl responded categorically, stating that it was none of his business since they hadn't been a couple for several months. Later, Andreas recounted that it was at this moment that something switched in his mind. He realized with horror that Nadine had indeed definitively broken up with him 3 months ago, and all his attempts to win her back had been in vain, no one was expecting courtship from him. Andreas felt rage and decided to return home, but not to come to terms with the offense. On that fateful October morning in 2018, at 5:30, Andreas came to his ex-girlfriend Nadine's house again. This time he wasn't shouting anymore, he just quietly knocked on the door and rang the doorbell. Rupert, Nadine's father, who was already highly irritated because Andreas had kept the whole family awake all night, responded to the knock. Barely opening the door, Rupert wanted to sternly order the young man to get lost and threaten him with the police, but he didn't manage to finish his angry tirade. Andreas instantly pulled out a gun and shot the man twice in the head. Rupert died on the spot. Stepping over his body, the killer found himself inside the house. Nadine's 51-year-old mother, Andrea, ran out to meet him. She immediately became the next victim of the enraged Andreas. Next, he shot the girl's brother, Kevin. Going upstairs, the criminal tried to break into Nadine's room, but she and her friend Florian managed to lock themselves inside. Then Andreas decided that the quickest way to get to them would be through the balcony. Going outside, he climbed up the decorative lattice on the facade of the house, broke the window, and shot his ex-girlfriend and her companion. This brutal massacre lasted only a few minutes. In total, 5 people died at the hands of Andreas. Having committed the mass murder, the young man immediately got into his car and drove straight to the Kitzbühel police station. Around 6 in the morning, he went inside and placed the gun in front of the police officer at the entrance. Andreas reported that he had just shot 5 people. In addition to the weapon, he also handed over to law enforcement a knife and a baseball bat that he had used to break the window to enter the girl's room. He never used the knife, presumably, he had taken it with him just in case. Arriving at the specified address, the police indeed discovered 5 dead bodies. The description and circumstances of the victims' deaths completely matched Andreas's words. They were all shot at point-blank range, each had received several bullets. There were bullet holes in Florian's and Nadine's hands, they had instinctively tried to protect themselves. Nothing was missing from the house. A toxicological examination showed that at the time of committing the crime, Andreas was completely sober, no alcohol or drugs were found in his blood. He had never come to the attention of law enforcement before. The small town of Kitzbühel was stunned by this tragedy. In their close-knit community, crimes were very rare, and ones so brutal were unheard of. Nadine's family was known and respected by all the neighbors. They were kind, friendly people who maintained excellent relationships with all the residents. The families of both the victims and the suspect had impeccable reputations in the local community. Everyone was especially saddened by the death of the young hockey goalie talent Florian Janny, who showed great promise in sports. And now, an ordinary desire to protect a friend from an intrusive admirer had become the cause of his death. Nadine's closest girlfriends later recounted that there was no romantic connection between her and Andreas, they were just buddies. But some believed that Florian had stayed the night at the girl's place for a reason, perhaps they had already started dating. After this horror, a small makeshift memorial was set up in the local church with photos of the deceased. During the month it was there, all those who cared left over 1,000 notes with words of mourning and sympathy. All this time, Andreas was in custody in a special cell for prisoners requiring close supervision. Law enforcement feared that he might take his own life, so they watched him diligently. The murderer was kept in solitary confinement for 23 hours a day, he was only allowed out for an hour to take a walk in the yard. Upon learning about what had happened, Andreas's relatives publicly addressed the town's residents, expressing regret and condolences for having raised such a dangerous criminal. They also informed the police about the disappearance of a gun that belonged to Andreas's brother. He had a firearms license and kept it at home for self-defense. Unfortunately, the killer knew where the key to the safe was. The serial numbers of both guns matched. Andreas himself also confirmed that he had stolen the weapon from his brother's home. At a press conference, Andreas's parents stated that their son must face the deserved punishment. While he was behind bars, his psychological state deteriorated. Despite the general outrage, the family still tried to somehow justify Andreas's actions. The father reported that his son suffered from depression and drank heavily after breaking up with Nadine. The mother suggested that he might have had mental issues, but why neither he himself nor his loved ones ever sought help from specialists remains a mystery. Andreas was charged with the murder of 5 people with the use of firearms and illegal entry into someone else's home. The defense lawyer planned to play on the defendant's questionable state of mind. According to Andreas, upon hearing insults directed at him from Nadine and her brother when they were kicking him out of the house, he lost touch with reality and couldn't control his actions. Only one thought resounded in his head: to kill the traitor. Based on his words, it appeared that he was in a state of affective disorder, so the lawyer hoped to mitigate the guilt. The prosecution, on the other hand, insisted that it was all a sham and that Andreas was fully aware of what he was doing, and therefore, he should face trial to the fullest extent. The defense disagreed with this. Independent examinations were conducted, but their results turned out to be ambiguous. In the end, the court ruled that there were no grounds for limiting Andreas's criminal responsibility. The defendant himself believed that he deserved a fair punishment and shouldn't evade responsibility. From the very beginning, he intended to confess, which is why he showed up at the police station immediately after the massacre and had no intention of retracting his admission of guilt. The lawyer continued to insist on the client's mental problems. The examinations conducted revealed that Andreas had a disorder in which he saw only two paths: leave and forget, or return and kill. No compromises. When he realized that the relationship with the girl couldn't be restored, the idea that Nadine would not belong to anyone became etched in his sick imagination. As soon as the trial began, the accused immediately pleaded guilty. According to him, this was supposed to simplify the consideration of the case and protect the relatives of the victims and his own family from further trauma. Andreas recounted in detail his relationship with Nadine, the grounds for jealousy, and the crime committed. As the defendant explained, Nadine was a very attractive girl. She always had plenty of admirers, which aroused a fierce jealousy in him. It was evident that Andreas held conservative views about women. In his opinion, a decent girl should have behaved differently. He couldn't come to terms with the rejection since the decision to break up didn't come from him. The defendant perceived Nadine as his property and was categorically against her dating or communicating with other guys, even after the breakup. He didn't care that they were just friends. Even in the courtroom, the murderer insisted that the woman should have behaved differently. Also, on that fateful night, Kevin, who had ended his friendship and communication with him, had finished him off. The girl's parents were irritated by him. The young man didn't want to lose this family, with whom he was closer than with his own relatives. As Andreas admitted, after breaking up with Nadine, his own parents didn't provide him with support, although he desperately needed it. The young man lost 10 kilograms and blamed others for his miserable state. In the end, he snapped and, in a fit of anger, shot them all. In court, Andreas expressed remorse and sympathy for the relatives of the deceased, but some considered it merely an attempt to soften his sentence. Prosecution witnesses claimed that Nadine had repeatedly made it clear to her ex that everything was over between them. He begged for another chance, hoping to rekindle the relationship, stalked her, refusing to accept reality. During the court hearings, Andreas behaved uncertainly, spoke quietly, often muttered something under his breath. In moments of emotional tension, he wept. At times, it seemed as if the defendant didn't fully realize what he had done and perceived the tragedy as an accident. Naturally, the prosecution insisted that it was a premeditated brutal murder of 5 innocent people. Andreas had plenty of time to think everything through while he was driving home for weapons and back to Nadine's place. At the very least, this happened when he returned for the gun, knife, and bat. The criminal had carefully planned everything to carry out his insidious plot. He even took a knife just in case, clearly not intending to leave anyone alive. At the trial, the prosecutors noted that on social networks, Andreas's marital status had changed from engaged to widowed. The defendant claimed that he had done this after killing the girl, but some acquaintances of his and Nadine said that it could have happened earlier. Already a few months after the breakup, Andreas began to perceive his ex's rejection more aggressively. He repeatedly stated that he wished her dead. And then he started writing that he suspected Nadine of having a relationship with another man and wanted to kill his rival. But no one took these threats seriously. The defense considered it simply an overly emotional reaction to the breakup that Andreas couldn't accept, but it didn't indicate the preparation of a murder. Nadine's girlfriends recalled that lately, she had been afraid of her ex and tried to avoid him in every possible way. The girl found out that Andreas had been beheading chickens with a machete and torturing cats. Such behavior seemed quite alarming. During the trial, the defendant was unable to provide clear answers to many questions about the course of the crime. Why, besides Nadine, did he take the lives of her friend Florian, brother Kevin, father, and mother? The lawyer saw this as proof that Andreas was not in control of himself and didn't fully realize his actions. However, the Austrian themis rendered a quite expected verdict: the shooting of 5 people could not be considered a mitigating circumstance. The version about Andreas's insanity was rejected. At the end of the trial, he was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment. However, this doesn't at all mean that he is guaranteed to spend the rest of his days behind bars. On average, those sentenced to life in Austria are released after about 21 years. Moreover, The defense lawyer assured that he would continue to seek the release of his client by filing appeals. Please write your thoughts and reactions in the comments below. For those who are new here, subscribing is the best way to stay updated on future content. Also give a like please. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Thank you for your support during this difficult time. Until next time, friends.